Well, they're lemon, they're like a big lemon, and they're moist, and you can't just have
That's been the problem with most sugar cookies and me.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we will stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. The first item is citizen comments. This first part of citizen comments is for agenda items only. We will have 3 minutes. Do I have any citizens that would like to address the board? All right, there's a podium, so I don't think anyone is yet. Okay. All right, so moving into celebrations. Adam.
Okay, so we have a few stories that are posted to the website that I'll highlight. Let me see, go in order, I suppose. So first was a big event that took a lot of planning and I thought was very well orchestrated, which was our Be Nice football game, which was a combination of Be Nice student club, student organization at our high school, with their faculty advisors, our cheerleading program, and our football team. So there were a number of different events to raise awareness, including information that was provided to attendees. There was also a pre-recorded message by I believe they were the captains on the team. It was played at halftime, as well as banners. The football team wore custom Be Nice jerseys for that, and the cheerleaders had Be Nice hoodies as well. So I think it was just an example of kind of continuing to amplify the message, using Be Nice as a vehicle, and really trying to continue to push the students out in front because it's designed to be a student-led organization. As the board knows, there's other resources, one of which you just approved at the last meeting, which our staff are using to address mental health issues and concerns and supports. But I think the connection and the relationship that's building between that student organization and our athletics department is a big win, and we definitely plan on keeping that momentum going. So overall, a very successful evening by all involved. Appreciate the support from those different entities within our district, and look forward to collaborating on more such events in the future. Last month I alluded to 5th grade camp. So this week I do have the story posted, so a photo gallery on there, but you can see some of the different activities that the students had a chance to participate in. Like I said last time, it's always a student favorite. It's something they'll be talking about well after 5th grade since 1972. So it is definitely a unique Williamston tradition. And then one of the things that's been exciting this year is really seeing a lot of our local service organizations kind of kick back into gear. Obviously, the last few years, they went through struggles that I think all of us can relate to or just be aware of, including our PTSA at our elementary campus. And so it's been really cool to see them back meeting and planning events and activities like many other service organizations and support entities within our district and our community. So I think the first example, at least for this year, was the family math night. It was very well attended. It was supported by the Math Honors Society at our high school. We came down to do a lot of different events and activities with our elementary students. And from all I have spoken to, it was a very successful evening and very well attended. So I greatly appreciate the PTSA and our Math Honors Club, Alpha Theta, collaborating on that activity. In December, our athletic director will be here to talk about our fall sports and winter sports preview. So I don't want to steal all this thunder, but I will highlight that the boys tennis team and girls golf team both competed at the state finals the weekend before last. Also, an update on the Discovery roof. We anticipate that will be completed at the end of this week. That's the rubber section, the second phase of that roofing project that was delayed over the summer due to supply issues. But we are hopeful that by the end of this week it'll be completed, and then that will finally, hopefully officially conclude all the roofing projects for the district until whatever the next cycle is, many years from now, hopefully. And then last Thursday, just highlighting again, going back to service organizations, the Chamber of Commerce also trying to get back on its feet after a number of tough years. And so one of the things they're doing is their monthly luncheons. Those have been hosted at a variety of different local restaurants. But we hosted the one last Thursday at the fitness center. We've done those in the past. They've always been at schools and usually around a holiday theme. In fact, we plan on hosting one in December at our elementary campus. But well attended, a great opportunity to reach out to members of our community that either own a business here or don't reside here or have not had children in the district, or at least not in a number of years, and connect with them and give them a tour of that facility. Our food service department, in particular, Jim Davis made a fantastic lunch, and Paige Colson took them on a tour of the facility and kind of showcased some of the different achievements and also of our athletic programs, but also some of the different resources that our Community Pool and Fitness Center and Richmond office provide to the community. So great way to connect with folks that don't normally come into our buildings, and based on the feedback, they were very pleased with the opportunity to have that visit. And like I said, lunch was pretty good. And then unrelated, the Phillies are in the World Series. That concludes my celebrations for this evening, pending any questions the board might have.
Any questions for Adam? All right, before we go into educational update, I do want to circle back to our last meeting where we had appointed Julie as our secretary. I just want to reaffirm that for this meeting, Julie is our secretary. Julie, you're on board for that?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on to educational update, we have Nick West here, who is going to go over our audit presentation. Welcome, Nick.
Perfect. All right. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Nick West. I'm a CPA. I'm a manager in the audit department at Manor Costerison, and I'll be going over the financial statements and the audit for fiscal year 2022. If you have any questions as I go through, please feel free to interrupt me and ask. Just very briefly on who we are, Manor Costerison. We're a CPA firm here in Lansing, Michigan. Got about 140, 150 people. We're heavily invested in the education niche, so about a third of our staff work fully on education for about 6 months of the year. We also perform about 115 school districts annually, so audits annually. So briefly on who we are. Next, moving on to the audit results. So at the very beginning of your financial statement, you would find our auditor's report, and in there we express an unmodified or a clean opinion. This is the highest opinion that we as your independent auditors can provide. So kudos to the district on a clean audit this year. Additionally, this is consistent with opinions that have been issued in years past as well. Next in the statement, you would find the management's discussion and analysis, or MD&A as it's commonly referred to. It's essentially your Reader's Digest version of the statement. So if you don't want to read all 70 pages, read the MD&A. It'll give you all the good financial highlights in there that you really need to know. In there, we do have highlights such as talking as pupil count. We talk about comparative information as well. It's the only part of the statement you'll find comparative. And then there are some nice paragraphs written by the district about factors bearing on its future at the very end. So I encourage you to read that at your own leisure. So what is new for fiscal year 2022? Well, there was GASB 87, which was the lease standard. This did have a material impact on Williamston's financial statements. So essentially what it did is on your government-wide level, so this is your full accrual, so it's a bit different than the fund level that you're probably used to seeing. It ended up adding an asset, a right-to-use asset, and then a liability. So the net effect on net position was zero, but it did add an asset and a liability. I believe those were for a couple buses that the district was leasing. So next, there is some more ESSER funding for fiscal year 2022. You probably heard about ESSER for the last 2 years already, but this did come out in the summer and the fall of fiscal year 2022. You had the 11.3, the ART, as well as the 11T as well. So just a reminder, those are one-time funds that the district has. And I believe, Sarah and I were talking about this, but I believe they expire or have to be spent by September 30, 2024 is the last that I had seen. So moving on. This is your statement of net position. This is your government-wide, so this includes your capital assets, long-term debt. So in here, it looks, again, a bit different than your fund level. Just a couple things to point out here. At the very bottom, there shows a negative net position of around $31.7 million. Just to remind you, 99% of school districts in the state of Michigan have a large negative net position. This is due to the state of Michigan having the pension and the healthcare liabilities, essentially for the teachers and everybody. That's a state of Michigan liability, but the school is required to put its proportionate share on your books. So that's why there's such a large negative deficit, essentially. So you can see the other post-employment benefit liability up there, the pension liability, as well as the deferred inflows and outflows also have a bit of those calculations in there as well. So good news, those did go down significantly this year. The bad news is they're probably going to go right back up next year with the stock market going back down. So I'll probably tell you the opposite story next year, unfortunately. A couple highlights. The district's net investment in capital assets increased by about $625,000, which tells us the district is paying off its debt quicker than its assets are depreciating. So that's always a good sign to see. Additionally, about $1.1 million worth of capital assets were placed into service, and then again, about $1.1 million worth of debt was paid off this year. Looking at the balance sheet for the governmental funds, the general fund, the district did have about actually had four major funds. You'll see the fourth one on the next slide. The general fund ended the year at about just over $4 million in fund balance. Kind of touch on that in a bit later. The sinking fund had a deficit of around $43,000. You'll see on the next slide, though, that it did increase in fund balance from fiscal year 2021. So, and a lot of that's due to that capital projects fund that the district established last year. So if you remember, the district set aside some money last year to pay for projects such as roofing and that, and those were able to take some funds away from your sinking fund and kind of add to fund balance for that. So you can see here the statement of revenues, expenditures, changes in fund balance are essentially your income statement for your fund level. You can see all four major funds, including the 2021 refunding. It happened all the way back in July of 2021, so a long time ago, but you guys did refund some of your school-owned revolving fund debt, if you remember that, to save some money on some interest. So as I mentioned before, general fund end of the year, just over $4 million in fund balance, which was about 19% of expenditures as of year end, or about 17% of revenue. And to give you some context with that, at the end of fiscal year 2021, because the 2022 numbers are not out yet, the statewide average for fund balance was around 18.5%. The Ingham ISD average was around 14.6%. Last year, Williamston was at 11.7, an increase this year to about 18.6. So MSBO recommends anywhere from 10 to 15%, but it really varies district to district, kind of what you feel comfortable keeping in your fund balance. Additionally, last year and this year, I had seen significant increases in fund balance across all districts for the most part due to that additional ESSER funding, additional increases in state revenue. State increased their per pupil foundation allowance quite significantly the last couple of years, as well as for fiscal year 23 as well. Which, talking about that, I like this slide because it really shows how much of your revenue comes from the state of Michigan. So that big giant orange block there, 78%, comes from the state of Michigan. So I just like it because it really shows how susceptible the district is to increases or decreases in state funding. You know, when times are good and the foundation allowance is going up significantly, benefits districts, you add to fund balance. If there was a recession or if there's maybe a new governor or something where they changed kind of the foundation allowance and maybe kept it consistent, that would significantly affect districts. So I just like to point that out so you're aware of that. Looking at a 3-year trend in revenue, you can see the large increase over the last couple of years. A lot of that is due to the state and the ESSER, which is the gray. Also did have increase in property tax values over the last couple of years, which have increased funds as well. Moving on to expenditures in the general fund, about 57% of expenditures are spent on instruction, about 40% are on support. Statewide average is anywhere from 55 to 60%, so you guys are kind of right in the middle there. I have noticed a general trend in increases in support services over the past couple of years due to all those ESSER funds. So as the districts are buying laptops, maybe some additional stuff for when kids were learning from home, those are showing up in the support services. So, and looking at a general trend, you can see expenditures have increased over the last couple of years due to all those additional ESSER funds that were spent, as well as some additional costs with inflation and different stuff of that sort. Moving on to the notes of the financial statements, these just provide some greater detail on some of the schedules in the front. Just a couple of highlights there. The sinking fund is required to be audited by law in accordance with section 12.12.1. So happy to note we did audit that, and there are no instances of non-compliance, nothing we needed to bring to your attention. So those funds are being spent according to what the law says. Additionally, the district's debt millage was at 7.84 mils as of year end. Many districts I work with are in the 7 to 12 mil range, so the district again is kind of right in the middle there. And then note 4, you can find more detail on capital assets. Note 6, you can look at all your bonds outstanding. And note 8, you can find more information on the pension and OPEB liabilities. Looking at your budget to actual schedule, as consistent with years past, the district did have a balanced budget for the original and the final budget, and at the end of the year ended up with a positive variance of about $1.7 million. So again, as I'd mentioned, this is fairly consistent with what I've seen across other districts. With all those additional ESSER funds, the state funding, which really increased fund balance for districts, which now's the time to save, in my opinion, with the increases there. And like I said, with uncertainty in the future, now's the time I think districts should be adding to fund balance, in my opinion. And I've seen that kind of across the districts that I work with as well. Districts have kind of been agreeing with that as well. So, district did have a single audit this year, as it did last year. District's required to have a single audit anytime it spends over $750,000 of federal funds. The district spent about $1.7 million this year. Just in 2020, I think you guys were in the $600,000 range, so you've almost tripled in your federal expenditures in just a couple of years. And a lot of that's due, again, to the ESSER funds, as well as the additional child nutrition funds, which I'll touch on in just a little bit. So there was a finding this year in regards to our single audit, the child nutrition cluster. If you remember back to last year, we did have an additional finding due to the excess fund balance in this food service fund. So touching on that, MDE essentially requires, they have a maximum allowable fund balance you can have in your food service fund, essentially so it doesn't act as a profit generating fund for the general fund. And that's not what's happening here with Williamston. Essentially, the last 2 years, you guys have been receiving all free meals from the federal government, which is a significant increase in your per meal reimbursement than your paid and reduced. And so with that increase, the district's just received a lot of additional revenue, which has led to a large increase in fund balance, especially throughout fiscal year 2021. Last year, you guys had the large increase due to all the students not being in school. This year, again, with students being in school, fund balance didn't increase as much, but with all that additional revenue, there just wasn't enough expenditures to decrease it. So I anticipate over fiscal year 2023 that this problem should remedy itself. For fiscal year 23, you guys are getting just free, or you're in the paid, reduced, and free portion, but a lot of your district is more in the paid and reduced, so you won't be getting those significant reimbursement rates as you have in years past. So, and again, costs are not going down. Wages, materials, food costs, all of that is increasing as well. So really, what does this mean for the district? MDE just requires a spend down plan where the district submits that to them and says this is how we plan on spending down these funds over the next year or two, and then MDE will look at that and give it back. So I've had a district that's been in this, that's had excess fund balance for 5-6 years, and nothing's ever happened from MDE. They always say that they could take away state funding, but they never have, because no one wants to take away the funding, right? So, and again, I don't anticipate that being an issue for Williamston. I think over fiscal year 2023, you'll see that fund balance go down significantly. And then just the last couple things, we did issue a governance letter to the board. In there, we talk about any uncorrected misstatements, any disagreements with management. Happy to note no instances there of any of that. Really appreciate all of Sarah and everyone here at the district's hard work and help through the audit. It's definitely a very time-consuming process. I think we were at the district for about a week and a half on site working through all the numbers and everything like that. Really, again, just really appreciate all of her and everybody else's help and hard work. So, and then just at the end, because GASB, there is a new GASB next year. They like to keep us on our toes and pretty much give us one almost every single year. So next year is GASB 96, related to subscription-based information technology. So essentially any online textbooks, curriculum, maybe accounting software, those could have to go on the district's books if they have a material impact. I do anticipate this one probably being material for most districts, and essentially what that means is it'll work exactly just like your lease liability or your lease standard did this year. You'll have a asset and a liability on your government-wide books. It won't change your net position or anything like that. So not a big impact. You probably won't even see it. It'll mostly just be in the financial statements, but throughout fiscal year 2023, the district will just be kind of getting all those different arrangements, gathering them together, and we come out for our preliminary audit in May of next year. We'll sit down with the district and assess whether that has a material impact or not on the statements. So, and that was all I had. So, just again, thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you for everyone's help and hard work, and be more than happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thanks, Nick. I just have one question. We have 3-year trends going back of where do you guys anticipate or provide any information on maybe the next 3-year trends?
So
with like property values, so that we kind of have an idea of how much to sock away and what we can spend on?
So we don't do any forecasting. MSBO does quite a bit of that. That would be who I would work with to kind of talk about future. But really, so your property tax and your state revenue kind of go hand in hand. And what I see, I mean, it is very uncertain over the next couple of years. No one does know for sure. Fiscal year 23, your state revenue increased again with the foundation allowance. But who's to say in 24 if that would necessarily happen or not? So, yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of a guessing game, and that's why I see a lot of districts stocking away fund balance this year just to be on the safe side. Because if you remember, just almost 8 years ago or so, back the recession and everything, funding was down quite a bit. You saw that in Williamston's fund balance was down significantly just even a couple of years ago. I think you guys were around the 5% range. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it's not a good word. You don't like hearing it. And hopefully,
The looming
hopefully it doesn't
recession.
come to that. But again, also with that, there's all those additional federal funds this year with the ESSER, that those are one-time funds. So you see a large increase. But once those are gone, if those expenditures are still in the budget, then you're going to see fund balances decrease significantly because you have all these expenditures, but you don't have any revenue to go along with it. So it's kind of it's a catch-22. It's very nice to have those funds, but they need to be sustainable.
Well, I think we've been doing a pretty good job spending those money and getting ourselves right.
Yeah, it's about making good choices now in terms of the investments you're making, but the one-time funding, and then also trying to plan out 2, 3, 4 years in advance, like you alluded to, because when we look at, in particular, staffing that we brought on board to get us through this difficult time and the greatly enhanced student need that we're seeing across the board, we're living beyond our means in terms of what we would expect to receive in a normal year in terms of per pupil allocation. So that's part of it too. We're putting money in fund balance, but some of it we've already allocated to contracts for next year. And so we put it in there temporarily, but I don't want to surprise the board when that's reduced next year to compensate our staff based on agreements that have already been made. And then the other piece is, how do we sustain these additional roles that we brought on board in our district long term when that funding is no longer there? And so that's an additional component of the long-term planning we're going through. So a lot of important decisions being made now that are going to impact the district, for many years to come. So that's part of the complexity of this whole thing.
Yep.
Oh, thanks, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 2 things. Just on the first slide, I believe there was that it talked about our enrollment being down, and I want to make sure that clarify that's based on a unique way of calculating enrollment that was done to kind of keep districts out of trouble the previous year. So that was our COVID crazy year that I'm trying to forget. But the state basically held our enrollment from 2019-2020, which was like a record high for us, and they kind of held pieces of that in place for that 2020-21 year. And so when the audit looks back comparatively last year, numbers are starting to come down, but in reality, as far as like actual students, last year we had about a 5% gain, and we had the largest percentage in the area. So much like our test scores that you'll see, right? We were like record highs, and then kind of fell off the chart, right, because of COVID. And now the rebound has begun, and so we just gotta keep that streak going, and hopefully also add some housing at some point. So, and then lastly, I do want to commend Sarah. Just make sure that's in the record. Coming into a new position, new district, new role in the middle of what I think every financial professional that I've spoken with has said is the most complicated, most challenging year in school finance that they've experienced. And coming in here with all of that and doing a tremendous job, I just want to make sure that the board's aware that that's an exceptional work that was done by Sarah to pull this together. So,
Good job, Sarah.
Absolutely. I mean, getting together everything for an audit is, I'm sure, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of stress, and like Nick said, you did an exceptional job, like Adam said, an exceptional job, and he said that you made it easy. So that's always great to hear that the working relationship seems to be a smooth one. So thank you so much, Nick, for the easy to follow presentation, and to Sarah for doing the legwork to help make it a smooth process. So
One thing that I will say in the finance meeting that, and it kind of follows up with what Adam was saying, is the staffing positions and the looking at the future in regards to those positions. One question that we did raise was whether or not the staff are aware of the limit right now that they're under. And the answer was yes, they are aware of that. They were brought in under the understanding that this is money that is time limited at this time, while the district is looking at the future and what can be done to continue those positions. But there was a question that was raised, so I just want to make sure that everybody understands that they do that the staff members that were brought in do understand that.
Perfect.
yeah, we've been very clear in postings that it's a grant-funded position or something along those lines. But again, we're trying to look and see how do we sustain that.
Yes.
So that's part of the complexity of forecasting that we're doing right now from a financial perspective. So
Yeah.
numbers look great as we sit here. I just again want to reiterate that there's plenty to use those funds for, some of which is already committed, and then even past next year, December 24, how do we get past that point and continue to keep the supports we have now to benefit our students? So there's a lot of thought going into that. So, but do expect those numbers to reflect those additional costs moving forward.
okay, any other questions? All right, again, thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if anybody has any more questions or anything, Adam and Sarah both have my contact information, so please feel free to reach out.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, we'll see you next year. All right, moving on. NWEA and M-STEP presentation by Dr. Cook.
Good evening. I'm sorry to be bringing more numbers to you after that presentation, and a lengthy one too, but it's important. So I'm excited in my own way to be able to present to you all of the assessments that we're going to be going through tonight. So let's see if we can get this going. There we go. So the agenda, I'm going to go through M-STEP and PSAT and SAT data. I'm also going to review, as the state requires, our Ames Web Plus for our K-1 and our NWEA for our 2 through 8. So if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask. And of course, at the end, there'll always be a chance to do that. Oh, did I do that wrong? There you go. On the ELA, I'm just going to describe what you're seeing because it's easier that way to do it in text. But this is our ELA M-STEP from 3rd grade all the way to 8th grade. And on the ELA M-STEP, our 3rd through 7th grade students scored close to a 60% proficiency rate. In comparison to the ISD, in 3rd grade, we were 24.8% higher, 4th grade, 9.9% higher, 5th, 18% higher, 6th, 21.7% higher, and in 7th, 21.7% higher. Our PSAT 8, we scored 45.3% higher than the county percentage. Across our district and our state, everyone had lower scores in math due to the pandemic. Williamston scores were higher than either the state or our ISD in all of our grades. In comparison to the ISD, in 3rd grade, we were 26.4% higher, 4th, 22% higher, 5th, 18.1% higher, 6th, 17.6% higher, and 7th grade, 24.8% higher. Our math PSAT, we scored 11.7% higher than the county percentage. I know it's a lot of information to share, but important information. For our ELA M-STEP, it's nice to look at the cohort over time. Due to COVID, our scores, like all Michigan districts, fell from our pre-COVID M-STEP years. 21-22, our district was still dealing with COVID. There are gaps in learning due to illnesses, masking, mandates. Trend data shows improvement from 2021 in all grades except 3rd and a slight dip in our PSA 8. Looking at cohorts, gains were made in all grades except 4th and 8th. 4th grade last year, if you think about it, they missed part of their 1st grade and were impacted in both 2nd and 3rd grade, which are crucial years for learning. 8th graders miss most of their middle school years and part of their 5th grade elementary year. The celebration is that we are trending up. Similar to ELA, the math trend was very positive from 2021 to 2022. The only downturn was PSAT 8. A celebration is the 7th grade showed a 16.1 gain over their years as a cohort group. We are consistently scoring above other Ingham districts and higher than the state, yet we are still in need of improvement in the area of social studies in 5th grade. Our 8th grade data shows that we had a decline, but our scores are above the IISD district and the state as a whole. For the past 3 years, we have scored above our IISD districts and the state as the trend data shows. The 11th grade data shows a steep decline. Our percentage is below both the peer districts and the state. This year, we are finally able to focus on instruction, MTSS, and our school improvement goals. We will take a deep dive into the why so that we can make improvements in this area. And just today, I received a message from our high school social studies team asking me to segregate the data for them. So we are looking at this even as I speak. In 5th and 8th grade science, we have shown a marked improvement over the years. We look forward to continuing the trend with the ability to refocus on instruction to provide a strong science foundation. In 11th grade, we dipped below our peers in the state. We did not see the large dip, though, in 2021, but recognize we did not see the rise either, as other districts did in 2022.
Do we have any idea of why the peer groups jumped as high as they did over the last year?
I don't, but I can try to find that out through our ISD.
Yeah.
We have Kelly Trout, and she looks
Because
at all
I mean,
of the
just
data.
such a dramatic increase. So
Yes, I will research that and get back to you on
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
For our evidence-based reading and writing in the SAT, a celebration, we were second place for that SAT, the evidence-based reading and writing, and the only district that ranked higher was Okemos in our whole county. So that is a definite celebration. We placed second in the county on math in the SAT, same with only Okemos ahead of us. For our EBRW SAT score over time, for the writing and the reading portion, we have been above both Ingham, Pierce, and all other state districts. We have been fairly stable during COVID years, as shown in the graph, whereas Ingham districts took a much larger downturn this past year. In math, our SAT scores have been above Ingham County and the districts, other districts in the state. We did not have the major downturn here either, as both of the comparison districts had. And over the 6 years shown, our math scores have been pretty consistent even through COVID. So now we're going to talk about Ames Web Plus. Is there any other questions on the M-STEP that, beside Chris's question as of right now? And of course, at the end too, I'll give you a chance.
One thing I would just say is, for me, I know you're going to be doing a deep dive on that social studies in 11th. I would love for you to come back and share with us what you learned, especially with that dramatic decrease that we were seeing, and just kind of see, you know, what the learning is and what some of the strategies may be in the future for us to be able to change that trend.
Very good.
And I agree with that. I also, the 5th and 8th grade social studies, so was there a change in the information from 2017? Because you do see kind of that decline from 17 to 18 to 19. So is this maybe COVID was, I mean, it was 21.9 to 19.5. So I didn't know if there was a change in the curriculum for the elementary
I'm gonna go back
social
to that.
studies.
Let's see where that
It's not so
was.
much that there is a change, it's just that when you're looking at limited amount of time in a day, given the constraints that we've been under, what's the first thing to go? And with the time that we've had, there's really been a focus on literacy, integrating content areas such as science and social studies, but really focusing on literacy and mathematics, in particular in 5th grade. And then you got to also remember that those tests are done over a 3-year period of time. So if you had students that weren't in school, they missed a third, right? So you could just kind of look at the percentages. Like if the test was evenly associated with each of the 3 years of learning, they roughly missed 1 out of every 3 questions because they didn't even get that. So I think that has a significant role to play in terms of the social studies piece. I mean, is it something to be cognizant of? Yes. But I think what we need to do at this point across the board with all of our test results is let our systems get rebuilt this year. And that's been the exciting thing this year, is that we're able to finally get back and focus on instruction again. We're not even 7 months out of having, you know, some classrooms that had, you know, 8 kids in it because of, you know, isolation requirements and quarantine and all that other stuff. So I think it's important to just remember where we're coming from, and then give our systems a chance to rebuild. And I think that, you know, we should be in great shape given the quality of the staff that we have here in our district. So something to track, but I don't think there's red flags here that we need to be aware of. And I think there's also just some peculiar anomalies, right? Like peer groups go down in SAT, right? We hold stable, right? They go up in social studies, we go down. Why is that? I mean, honestly, I don't know how much, despite how much research Dr. Cook gives and the amount of information that's available to us in terms of what we can actually see from those tests, that we're really going to be able to put together a conclusive answer for you. I think if we go several years in a row, of course we don't want to do this, but if we go several years in a row and some patterns, now you can start to create some causality in terms of what might be taking place. But I think we need more time to rebuild our systems, really get back to what we do, and I would argue do better than anybody in terms of actual instruction. And I'm kind of excited to see where we can get to. But I get it; it's a blip on the radar here that we need to turn around.
Yeah, I
in
also.
some areas.
I also want to add that the high school is really pushing again MTSS. They had just really started right before COVID, and so now they are doing a system where they're looking at students that have need and have a gap in learning, and obviously this will be one of the areas
Okay.
as a core. And I just had that discussion with the high school, so I'm excited about them restarting that.
And we just had that new social studies curriculum that was purchased. I was just, looking
Yes.
at that, the only thought that I had is I do know, or at least I don't know where I heard it, but possibly where we do try to integrate some of the social studies through the reading program, but now we just bought the new reading, so they have a totally different book selection now than what they might have used. So if that was kind of where that was coming in, would that now decrease it even further if we weren't implementing the social studies through the reading program or the literacy piece of it? But
again, the curious thing is, going back to the high school, the SAT is predominantly a social studies vehicle that's used as a predictor of future college success. So can you read? Can you, what are your literacy skills? Can you write? Right? And they're using social studies as a vehicle where students are doing, generally speaking, pretty well. So we know they have the ability, right, to do well in the social sciences. So then that starts to leave you with some other variables that aren't really connected to the instruction the students get or the students themselves, right? And so,
Different
trying to
test.
figure those things out is going to be complicated. And again, I'm not making excuses because we're going to dig in this and see what we can do. But I'm just optimistic that getting back to Williamston instruction, that in time we're going to be just fine. But I mean, I can tell you, I can raise our social studies and science scores this year if the state did something to make those tests meaningful to the students who are taking them, right? The SAT means something to most kids. What does the M-STEP social studies test mean to them? Okay, so you throw a couple $1,000s at a student for being proficient in those subjects, I guarantee you those scores will turn around pretty quickly. Now, that's just one thing to consider, right? I mean, there's other things we have to dig into, but we're also talking about 8-year-olds taking a test, and that is not at the top of their priority list. So I also don't want to make this look like these are excuses, because this is not bad. I mean, there's a lot of really good data here, bright spots for us, and we're rebuilding from a very difficult couple of years. And I want to win, right? I want to have the best scores, so we're going to continue to focus on this. But I think we also have to just remember where we're coming from, and we're not even 7 months away from classrooms with a handful of kids left in them. So we'll get there.
all right, perfect.
I believe that too.
Thank
So
you.
for Ames Web Plus, it's just kindergarten and first grade that take this assessment. Oh, sorry. So just to review, AIMS stands for Achievement Improvement Monitoring System, and it's a research-based screening, benchmark, and progress monitoring system, and we use it for all three that we use in K and first grade to determine students that are at risk. This drives our placement within the MTSS system in those grades. You'll see this right now. Sorry, I keep going faster than I'm doing it. So Ames Web Fall math scores. In kindergarten, we benchmark students in math fluency. There were 4 more students in Tier 1 than last year. In Tier 2, we had 19 students less that fell in that tier as compared to last fall. Tier 3 also had 1 more student. Overall, we have less kindergarten students than we did last year. In first grade, math fluency is also benchmarked. We had 20 students less in Tier 1, 12 students more in Tier 2, and 19 students more in Tier 3 than we did last fall. This shows the gap that a lack of instruction can cause due to COVID for our youngest learners. Our goal is to have the most in Tier 1, the least in Tier 3. For our early literacy fall-to-fall comparison in Discovery, a large focus is on literacy. Our WIN interventions utilize 6 WIN paras that work in classrooms during their assigned WIN time. This slide shows that the K Early Literacy Division of students in our MTSS intervention program for both last year and this In Tier 1, we have 18 less students than we did last fall. In Tier 2, we have 1 less. And at the Tier 3 level, the data showed 10 more students needing Tier 3 intervention. Many students missed instruction during their pre-K years, which is causing a gap also in their early literacy proficiency. Within the MTS first grade intervention program, we have 15 more students in Tier 1 this fall than compared to last fall. So that is a celebration in our first grade. As depicted in the triangle for this fall, Tier 2 shows a 10 student decrease from last year. Tier 3 has 4 students more than they did last fall. Now we're going to get into our NWEA, and that is done 2nd through 8th grade. So in review, the measure of academic progress, which is acronymed MAP, is a computer adaptive test created by Northwest Evaluation Association, another acronym, NWEA. We use this as our benchmark assessment given 3 times per school year. We utilize the results to place students in our MTSS intervention programs. After each assessment period, the teachers during a data day reassess to make sure students are placed appropriately within our WIN system. The Rosh unit, which is the RIT score, is scaled to help measure and compare academic growth. It provides staff with a measurement that can be used to see if growth is taking place over time. It also shows where a student's present level of achievement is currently. And that's like the ruler measuring a student growing in height. For fall 2022 in reading, this fall every grade achieved over the mean written reading. Other than 2nd grade, all grades showed over 60% of the students that were above norm writ for this fall. In math, every grade achieved over the mean written math. All grades hovered close to the 60% mark, with students at or above the norm writ. 4th graders were above 70%, and 5th grade surpassed 66, above norm mean writ. In the trend data from 5th through 8th grade shows marked improvement from 2021. Each grade had a higher than 60% student population above the mean norm writ. 8th grade showed the largest gain at 14%. The cohort trend also increased, with 8th grade making the largest gain at 7% more students achieving at or above the norm writ. For math cohort trend data, students grew or mostly held their own in meeting the norm written math for grades 5-8 from 21 to 22. 5th grade made the largest trend gain with 14% more meeting the norm writ. For cohorts, 8th grade had the largest increase with 13% more students achieving at or above the norm writ, and this was followed by 6th grade having a 7% cohort gain. And now if there's any other questions or comments, I know it's a lot of data all at once.
How are the teachers using this data to inform their instruction?
So what they do is, obviously we have coaches in our buildings, and they meet during their data days, and we look at the percent, and there's a cutoff. So we take our students, and during that win, the teachers who are the most informed take our lowest, most neediest students, and then we drive that through that win system. So just like the pyramid that you saw for Ames Web Plus, it's the same thing in all of our 2nd through our 8th grade. Obviously middle school being different because we have classes that meet the needs of our most needy students. So this data consistently drives how that program looks, how the interventions look, how it breaks it down so that we even can say what's the skill that that student needs. And we go from tier 1 all the way to tier 4 when we have students that between our 6 and 8 weeks have not shown improvement. We consistently relook at the data, do benchmarking, and then we move the student to either the next tier up or back, depending on what they need. So this is actually what does drive our WIN intervention program. Thank you.
Again, just to reiterate, right, this is the exciting part about this year is we used to kind of like live and breathe these data, and this is how we influence the results that we've traditionally gotten in our district. It just hasn't been I mean, it's been there, but it's not been like the thing right in front of you the last few years. And so kind of getting back to the point where we can really dig into this and action it. I'm very optimistic about kind of getting those systems to rebuild what we're going to be able to get back to. So there's a lot to be positive about, not only in terms of these data, but what's to come.
And to piggyback on that, which is another next presentation that I'll do, so it's all kind of combined even with our audit, but we now have 6 of our WIN paras back, where last year we had 3 because it was very hard to find people to work during that COVID time period. And so we're back up and running, which really helps because each of our classes have a WIN para now. So with that being said, is it okay if I run into the next part of?
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Oh, sure.
that what's great about the NWEA is that this is a test where when you get the scores, you get them back right away, and you're able to have those data well days, and teachers are able to say, okay, this student needs support right away, and they're able to decide right then they need tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 support, and those students are able to get those interventions right away. So there isn't that gap where MSTEP has that gap between time where that student doesn't get that intervention right away. So NWEA is different in that aspect. So both have their benefits, right? But NWEA gets that intervention right away. So I just want to thank you for highlighting those achievements, and I don't want to say that achievements are big or small. Achievements are achievements. And so when you talk about even just one student going from tier 3 to tier 2, that's a big deal, and that's celebrated. And so thank you for highlighting those things. So yeah, anybody else have anything else?
Any questions? And you can always contact me too if you think of something after. So this year, kind of piggybacking off of our audit, we have received a lot of federal and state funding, and we've just come across another grant opportunity that I'm going to speak to you about. And our onus is to inform you of what this opportunity is and how we're going to utilize the funds. So the federal government has initiated a grant opportunity under 98C to be utilized to supplement the needs of districts for general education students who are at risk. One of our at-risk populations are students that are in our MTSS system that we just talked about. The state of Michigan has helped support the system by providing title grants. We receive Title I, Title II, and Title IV, which we pool together to pay for coaches and WIN paras at the elementary and the middle school campuses. Over the past 4 years, our allocation of title funding, the sources has significantly decreased. In 2019 to 20, prior to the pandemic, we received a total of $224,356. In contrast, this school year, we received a total of $92,828, and this is a difference of $131,528. Big difference. Currently, due to the lower title funding, only a small portion of our elementary MTSS paraprofessional salaries were able to be covered by our title grants. These positions are vital, as I just explained, with our MSTEP and NWEA vital to addressing learning loss and providing academic interventions to our at-risk students. The amount of 98C grant funds is dependent on how many districts apply for the funding. So at this time, I don't know how much that amount will be. Currently, though, the minimum amount a district could expect to receive is $36.75 per student based on last year's fall membership count, in which we had 1,855 students. Based on that count, our minimum expected amount is going to be $68,171.25. And this has just been told to us, so we really don't know our exact amount yet. Once the grant closes at the end of November, we will be notified of the specific amount we'll receive. And when we are notified of the amount, we will apply it first to our MTSS elementary paraprofessional salaries that were not covered by our title funds, and then it will go to our middle school MTSS coaches and paraprofessional salaries. And Williamston will meet all requirements necessary to receive the full grant funds. Is there any question on this?
But, one point to highlight is, for your situational awareness, you hear in the news, like record funding or things along those lines. And one of the things I just like to bring out is like a lot of that, especially like the categorical funds, this is one of, they don't just give it to you. So that'd be great, but you have to apply for almost all of them. And some of them have really quite complex application processes. And so it's much more complicated in reality than what you would be led to believe from press conferences or short news articles or headlines that you might see. So this is another example of that. Obviously, we're going to do our part to go out and get the money that's already been allocated, but I just want to make sure it's known that these are not automatics.
Right.
And even some of the funding that you apply for in some cases has so much red tape around it and restrictions that you have to get very creative in terms of how you can apply it in a meaningful way. So anyway, just want to bring that out, that there's more to the story than what you might see in a headline.
So Adam, just why would the funding decrease so much between 2020 and 2022 school year? Like on just this little grid, the title,
Yeah.
1, 2, and I mean, why is it such a significant?
So
Like, is that federal government funds,
well, it's
Michigan
based
funds?
it's based more or less on the federal government's assessment of the economic well-being of the region, so or the area, that the boundaries, and so our free and reduced lunch percentage has actually gone up. And in fact, we've added the middle school as a targeted Title I school now, which had never been the case in the past. So we're actually seeing more need from students, but the funding is decreasing, and there's a bunch of different theories that I can't confirm as to why that might be the case. Don't want to speculate, but.
And I believe that title money is state funded. Is that right, Sarah? Yes, yeah, it is. It's state funded. And what happened was during the pandemic, originally we thought it was decreased because of the free and reduced lunch, but everybody received free lunch. So nobody was applying for any kind of free and reduced lunch. So everybody's funding went down, OCMS and everybody at our ISD. So we're all expecting it to go back up. But it is more complicated, and I honestly would have to look up why it all went down so drastically.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
over
it's
the years,
pretty significant.
yeah, and it's been over the years. It has not just been now, but this is
Been
the
going.
biggest drop that we've had, the most.
Okay.
Yeah, noticeable.
Well, sometimes I just, because I haven't been on the school, I hadn't been here for a decade, so knowing whether or not they're allocating these funds into a different fund that we get, or if they're, how everything is allocated, or if they just decided this is just one that we're just not going to allocate to district. And so it is, you're saying, so every district is different. So
Yes.
Lansing may get a totally different amount based on their economic region
Yes.
numbers and our
Yes.
numbers.
And
Okay.
it is state funded.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're also getting way less than Flint apparently, with the change. So, yeah, it's just, I think it was a little bit of a surprise to everybody. How it had been kind of slowly decreasing, and then it was like
Boom.
kind of caught your attention this year when, and that was my surprise too, because I'm like, our reduced lunch percentages have gone up. And we have an additional targeted Title I school, so you would think the funding would go that way, but it's not how it worked.
But nobody applied for any because they didn't have to, because
Right.
it was free, and so it affected everybody in that way. Yeah, it was, we talked about it at directors' meeting, it wasn't just us.
Okay.
Yeah, big
Well,
time. Any
Not
other-
good, but thank you for.
No, you're
explaining.
welcome. Any other questions? Thank you.
very much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
all the
Thank you, Michelle.
information.
Thank you.
And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to Dr. Cook or
Yeah.
to Adam.
Yeah.
Please. Perfect, thank you. All right, moving on to superintendent's report. Adam is going to talk about board goal 1, 2, and 3. This is regarding the evaluation that we will be discussing next month.
So I'm going to focus, again, these are just designed to be a recap because the board's been hearing updates on this throughout the year. I'm just going to highlight a few things from goal number 1, which is high quality educational experiences for all students, and specifically focus on objective number 2. So under objective 2, the focus is on integrated learning and blended learning. One of the big, I would say, accomplishments for the district this year, particularly since last February when some financial decisions were made in terms of how to support this, was our one-to-one initiative at our secondary. So we're talking about being able to effectively integrate blended learning as a vehicle to enhance student learning. We were able to accomplish that, and we're off to a really good start with that project. As far as strategy number 2, focusing on the MTSS structure, there were a couple things that were Dr. Cook hit on, but I do want to highlight again, building back the structures that we had in place pre-COVID, in particular the WIN support, Tier 2 intervention, elementary school. We're also in the process of providing a after-school intervention program. I believe at least one of the elementary schools is probably going to be starting that as early as next week. That'll be an additional opportunity for students to get tiered intervention to make up some of the deficits that have developed over the last few years. Moving on to strategy 3, which is focused more on the mental health and behavioral supports. We have added the aforementioned ancillary support staff across the district, even more so over the summer, to include bringing on additional school psychologists and a district mental health specialist. And that's, of course, on top of other investments the district has made over the last several years in that area. And then in strategy 4, which again specifically focuses on mental health, in addition to those additional staff I just mentioned, there's also been programmatic implements, including the Freshman Connect program for the first time to this year's 9th graders, the expansion of Be Nice, and the adoption of the Trails program, which the board is aware of. First lesson, which was taught as a Tier 2 support at the middle school last Friday. So not even 2 weeks after board approval, that program is already rolling out. And so kudos to our staff for being on top of the ball on that. A couple other things I'd like to point out, because they're not always well known, but especially at the secondary, at the high school specifically, in the news and notes that the high school sends out, there are always invitations to parents to join the Be Nice mental health webinars. So we are inviting parents and anyone else who would like to be a part of that to join those, to learn more. So it's not just like the one-off events like a Be Nice football game. While those are important, there's this constant invitation to be involved and attend those and learn more. And then another small piece, but the high school sends out a weekly survey to students to give them an opportunity to respond, to seek support. It doesn't have to be like a major crisis. It can just be small things that are going on in their lives that they might need some additional help with. related to school, and those are looked at in action by our staff. So a lot of ongoing new and then proven ongoing initiatives around mental health across the district. And then moving on to objective 3 of goal 1, which has to do with the evaluation system. Obviously for our staff, obviously we've made some modifications on the fly for that over the last couple of years due to lack of existing data, and also of course just recognizing the madness that the last few years have been, and the great effort that's been exerted across the board to just keep kids in school and keep some momentum and quality instruction going. But we have continued to add evaluation systems over the last 12 to 24 months, including a revised model for pairs, a new model for secretaries, and last spring debuted a evaluation model for our food service employees. Continuous progress as far as that board goal and objective. I'll pause there. Any questions on goal 1 as a whole, keeping in mind that that's a huge goal and we could be here for days talking shop about that, but in addition to the things we've heard throughout the year or the things I highlighted this evening, anything else that you'd like to inquire about?
Thanks, Adam.
All right, so goal 2, I think Mr. West handled the audit piece of that, so the board should have a pretty good feel for where we are financially. But any questions that I can address around goal 2 or Sarah can speak to that the board might be curious about?
It looks like we have good financial standing, which is great to hear.
All right, and then rounding out then the board goal 3, keep in mind we covered 4 and 5 at our last meeting. Prepared a memo for the board, just kind of articulating some quantitative aspects, some of the different communication mechanisms that are available. Obviously, this doesn't include everything, but the key point, as I talked about earlier, now that especially service organizations are kind of gearing back up and we're getting back to a pre-COVID routine in terms of communication, is really trying to liaise or become the district liaison and connect into those groups and make sure they're aware of what's going on in the school. They have their questions answered. Because again, many of those groups might not have children in the district now or for the last many years. So still working on the graphics. I like this kind of stuff. So graphics and banners at the fitness center. We got the staircase leading up to the weight room is done, but there's a few more things that we'll get going there, which I'm excited about. It's just a nice visual representation of some of our great impressive achievements of our staff and students. And then the promotional video, the filming is complete. They're working on the editing, and we're hoping to have that sometime in November. So it's been a couple of years since we've been able to do one of those. So looking forward to seeing how that one turns out. But any questions on board goal 3, which is communication?
No, I think it's very well rounded. We have flyers that go, so we have like snail mail, we have things on the website, we have all different ways that people can get communication, which I think is important because people get communication in many different assets. So I think it's important that we try to reach as many people as we can.
Great, so shifting then to upcoming items, or agenda items, presentations. At the November meeting, as I alluded to on our last meeting, there'll be a presentation of the high school in conjunction with Fair State University on a proposal for a new avenue for dual enrollment for our students that we're excited about. And then, so that'll be up for board discussion and potentially approval if you like what you hear. And then in December, as I mentioned previously, Paige Paulson will be here to provide a recap of fall athletics and a preview of winter sports, as well as an update on the fitness center enrichment office. Any questions I can address on upcoming agenda items?
No? Thank Sam?
Thank you, Adam. Okay, moving on to board committee reports. Board finance and facilities. Chris?
We had a long meeting when in preparation of the audit. We went much more in depth into the 80 odd pages that you see in your packet. But it was a very good presentation, and I was very happy with the outcome, and feel like we're really in a good place in regards to the audit. We'll be talking about this, but there is a need. We had an update on our bus fleet. There is a need right now for us to move on a bus for our fleet. And we'll talk about that because we do have to move quickly. We were supposed to be replacing one. One of them fell through in regards to us being able to get one that we had in our fleet off of lease. So we need to move to replace that bus as soon as possible, which is why we need to set aside the rules tonight to do that. We had an update on the sinking fund. We're in a good place right now with the sinking fund, and on track to really getting back to I'm going to say almost like a zero balance in regards to being where we need to be for next year, and because we've spent a little ahead in regards to the projects that we've been working on, but we're almost at that level of where we should be in regards to where we are with the sinking fund monies right now. And then we had another good update with ESSER. ESSER is very confusing, but Sarah is doing a great job with that to be able to stay on top of it. There were some questions that were raised in regards to the end dates of some of these and when monies had to be spent by, but Sarah was taking a look into that to see what those final dates were going to be.
Yeah, so what I have found is still through what Nick had just stated is through 2024. And I know you saw a memo that said they may be able to be spent through the ARPS or 3 through 2026. But I don't think I've seen anything officially posted for that.
It's moved because we've already spent it.
Right, that one doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's the 11T
funding
that we
that's,
care about.
It's the 11T funding that we'd like to see extended, but we'll see.
Yeah.
The 11T funding is the funding that is really hard to spend, that Adam's kind of talked about in the past.
Yeah, it's funding that's targeted for subgroups of students that have been deemed by the government to be disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So you have a smaller group of students, and it would be nice to spend that funding on them over a longer period of time because you don't recoup lost learning instantly, right? So longer term intervention, which we have the capability to do, but we have the deadline in terms to spend the money. So we would like to see an extension of that, but that's tied up in a very complex federal stimulus bill, and whether we'll see that is doubtful.
Well, and that money also is tied into, it has to be used at certain times of the day, and, I mean, it's very convoluted the way that you have to figure out how you can use that money, so.
Okay.
That's all, not bad.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right, we'll keep us updated, Sarah, how that goes. Thank you, Chris. And so, as Chris alluded, we do have a discussion around the purchase of the school bus. So in the board book, you will see a memo. Adam, do you want to talk first? And then Chris, can fill in the gaps, or Chris, do you want to talk first?
Unfortunately, as I mentioned, one of the buses that was on lease, we were not able to purchase off of lease, and that leaves us with a vacancy in our fleet. So basically, we have found another bus at a little bit. It is a little bit more expensive than what we would have spent on getting this lease off of, or getting this bus off of lease, but it is the best of the options that are available to us. The amount of miles on the bus is good. I mean, it's got 27,500 miles, so It is definitely one that will last us a while, and we would be able to, we would be purchasing this straight off, so it wouldn't be another lease situation on this one. So we're moving it forward, bringing it forward to the board today, so that we can move forward quickly and be able to solidify this for our fleet.
And it is a recommendation coming from the finance.
It is, yes.
Where you are board.
We are.
Decide the rules.
Mhm. We don't like doing it, but this one is it's a timing issue
Yes.
of making sure that we can get this and it doesn't get sold before we can actually get it.
And that is why there is that rule to set aside the rules. And
Yep.
in these circumstances of timing, it's one of those options. Is there discussion on this?
Nope, other than I do have a question to like what happened to the one that we had that was on lease? Did they sold it from underneath us or something? And basically it was like your lease was ending and somebody bought it and then you gotta turn it in?
More or less, the answer is, there's never been in the contract, there's never been a written agreement where they are required to sell us the bus coming off the lease. So we have been able to work that, so it's been the case in every other instance, and we have made out financially on that very well, very, very well in terms of what we've been able to purchase as buses coming off the lease, much less, in some cases, half of market value. So in the aggregate, we've really won on this. But at the end of the day, there's nothing in the lease agreement that requires them to sell us the bus when the lease expires. And in this one instance, they chose not to. So,
Well, I bet you it was a
five-
monetary benefit to them, so.
We had 5 buses coming off lease. They sold us 4 of them, but for whatever reason, this one no. So
This one, no. All
that's
right.
kind of how we ended up in this spot. We have one more leased bus left in the fleet, bus 13, and that'll be coming up due, I think, not this year, but the following one. Don't quote me on that, but either this year or the next year. So then we'll be back in an all purchased fleet.
And I will give kudos, to Adam and Brandon. They did fight the good fight in trying to make it happen that we would be able to keep the other bus, but it
Bummer.
did not end up working out. So
So what happened to the bus that went off the road in September? Is that one being repaired or?
It's being repaired. It's pretty much just cosmetic stuff right now. It just takes some time to buy a shop. So, but we anticipated being back on the road shortly. So.
Perfect.
So this is a company that we've done business with for a very long time, so we feel comfortable moving forward with this. So if we do move forward tonight with this, the monies will come out of the capital projects fund in the general fund as part of the 2022-23 budget. So keep that in mind. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, and again, I just want to reiterate, sorry,
No, go
but
ahead.
we had set aside money already to purchase
Yeah.
this. It's more than what we had set aside, so there's some additional cost, but we're not absorbing this entire cost in terms of the
Right.
budgeted expense for this year.
All right.
we're ready to. With that in mind, I make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education set aside the rules to add an action item to the board meeting agenda for October 24th, 2022. This will be an action item 8B1, roll call vote items, bus purchase.
Seconded.
Motion by Chris, seconded by Deb. Is there any discussion? I do want to say that this is under a roll call because it is over the threshold of $25,000.
All right.
Okay,
All
all
right.
those in favor? Aye.
Is this a
Aye.
roll call?
Yeah.
This part is not a roll call.
Okay, then aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so this will go under action item. Or roll call.
Yep.
Okay, so moving ahead to our action items for this evening. Can I have a motion for routine item, consent calendar.
I move that the Williamston Board of Education approve the minutes from the October 10th, 2022 board meeting as presented.
Second?
Motion by Deb, seconded by Julie. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. And then we do have one roll call item.
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the purchase of one 2020 bus from Midwest Transit Equipment. The cost of the bus is not to exceed $83,900. Funding will come from both the Capital Projects Fund and the General Fund as part of the 2022-2023 budget.
Motion by Chris, seconded by Dave. Any discussion? Okay, I will have Julie take us through a roll call.
Chris?
Yes?
Dave?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Julie, yes. Sarah?
Yes. Okay,
So
motion
pass.
passes. Okay, separate action items. Approval of the WHS Theater Production Class Proposal. Do I have
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the WHS Theater Production Class proposal as presented.
Motion by Chris, seconded by Dave. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do I have a motion for approval of board policies to remove, revise, rewrite, and add?
I move that the Williamston Board of Education remove the following board policies as presented: 8730, publications, distribution, and 9100, board community relations.
Second?
Motion by Julie, seconded by Chris. Any discussion? All those opposed, I'm sorry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Approve board policies to remove, revise, rewrite, and add board policies 8990, 9010, 9020, 9190.
Move that the Williamston Board of Education revise the following board policies as presented. 8990, student fees, fines, charges, and deposits. 9110, public information program. 9020, news media relations. And 9190, interviews with students.
Second.
Motion by Dave, seconded by Deb. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Do I have a motion for board policies to rewrite? 8350, 8350R.
I move that the Williamston Board of Education rewrite the following policies as presented: 8350, student suspension and expulsion, and 8350-R, student suspension and expulsion.
Second.
Motion by Deb, seconded by Dave. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Do I have a motion for board policies to add or new? Policy 8351, 8352, 8354.
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education add the following new board policies as presented: 8351, student discipline, students with disabilities; 8352, reinstatement following expulsion; and 8354, suspension from class, subject, or activity by teacher.
Second.
Motion by Chris, seconded by Deb. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Review of board goals. Correspondence that we have in your board book. Okay, this brings us to our last opportunity for citizen comments. Seeing none, we will move into board member reports and requests. Board member reports and requests. Okay, seeing
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion by Julie, second by Dave. All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.